I just started reading this. 11-11, a hometown hero, La Russa's last ride in red. Did you have to change that, by the way?
Yeah, you caught that, didn't you?
Did you seriously have to change that?
Like the day before the book was due, he announced that he was going to the White Sox.
We got to get to that. So, a hometown hero, La Russa's last ride in red, and a Miracle World Series for the St. Louis Cardinals. Benjamin Hochman, foreword by Chris Carpenter, closing remarks by Jason Mott. Some star power right there, buddy.
No question. Yeah. No, I'm honestly, I'm really proud of the book. It's probably the best thing I'll ever write. It's the story of the 2011 Cardinals, and it's the 10-year anniversary this year.
So if you have questions, comments for Ben Hochman, text him in 855-282-8255. So let's hit on the book a little bit before we talk all things sports, and then again, we're going to go book, second segment. So tell me about that. You're about ready to print, and La Russa gets the job with the White Sox, and you have to change the whole title?
Yeah, because it was La Russa's last ride. La Russa's last ride was on the cover, so we had to figure it out. What do we do? And we just added the words in red. So hopefully he doesn't later on become the manager of the Cincinnati Reds or the Red Sox or something, and then I'm screwed.
You never know, though, because he's, 76 years old now?
Not in his mind.
Exactly. And he still has that competitive fire, because even when he retired from managing, he worked with Diamondbacks, Red Sox, Angels. You can tell he always wants to compete. Yeah. And now here he is back at the age of 76 with a really good team, but also always making headlines. Still.
Always, yeah. And that was the story in 2011, too. I mean, he had the shingles. Then he kept to himself that he was going to retire and only told a few people. And then, of course, his best friend, Dave Duncan, his confidant, had to leave the team. His wife had cancer. I mean, there was so many storylines. But, yeah, La Russa in 2011 and La Russa in 2021, same dude.
And so you bring up the shingles. So my first year was 2008. So I got to cover, 4 seasons of Tony. And I've told this story before. It's not even a great story, but I'll never forget.
Well, let's say it on the radio then.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've told it many times. But there was a day where I'm at a game for Fox 2. It was probably a Saturday or a Sunday game. And so for whatever reason, and I'm not blaming anyone, but for whatever reason, we weren't able to get a Fox 2 camera in time for Tony's postgame. Okay. I think the photographer arrived for whatever reason as the clubhouse is opening for the players. But something happened where we needed to get Tony. And it was during the shingles outbreak. Sure. And I'd been there for a while, but it wasn't like I was great friends with Tony, but he always treated me really, really well. So I just needed Tony for something. It might even have been a different story that was going to air on Monday and they were going on a road trip. Whatever it was. I basically have to go in and knock on Tony's office. And I see him laying down on a couch with a towel, I think it was a wet towel, over his face, dealing with his shingles. And I felt so terrible. I probably shouldn't even have asked him. But I was like, Tony, our photographer just arrived. Is there any way I could just get a couple comments? And he kind of awakens like out of a tomb, takes the towel off his face with the shingles, and he did the interview. So that's Tony.
He did do the interview.
He's a grinder. I felt so bad, but it's a good story now. I probably shouldn't have asked him, but he did it, so it's all good.
But you were like an up-and-coming journalist at the time. Like, you needed the La Russa interview. There's an old story about Dan Patrick, who was an up-and-coming guy. He had to make a phone call at a phone booth, and Howard Cosell walked up to him and said, "Hey, kid, let me make a call." And he said no to his hero, Howard Cosell, because he needed to make the call and get it in. Howard Cosell hated him for then on. And so, yeah, but you had to do it. You had to get the interview.
I did. I cared. Well, I still care. But back then, you're trying to get contracts. You're new, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. You're doing everything. So, couple texts. Did Chambers, you my boy, make it in the book? And I read, I think it was in the Jason Mott closing part, he actually mentioned Adrian Chambers.
Oh, my gosh. So that's been the fun part about this book. And I know we'll talk about the 2011 Cardinals and the Blues and all that, maybe even the Steamers and the Storm and the Ambush. But, yeah, I mean, that's the fun of the book is for how much Pujols and Freese is in there. There's a bunch of Gerald Laird. There's a bunch of Adrian Chambers. There's a bunch of everybody, because that was the cool thing about this team. And I interviewed Adrian Chambers, and he told me stories that made me cry. He told me stories that made me laugh. I mean, and he's all in there, and he had a couple huge hits on there. And, I mean, everything from the story of Joshua. I assume you know the story of Joshua. That's in there.
I was at that game.
Come on.
I believe, again, this is 10 years ago. I believe that was a Friday night. Okay. So I used to, for 10 years, I filled on the morning show a lot because Kat was out for Fox Sports Midwest at the time, obviously Bally Sports now. So I was on that show a ton. So Joshua was on the show a lot. And I know I was at that game. I can't remember if it was a Friday, Saturday, whatever it was, but I remember they played that song a couple times. I believe Colby Rasmus struck out both times.
Oh, yes.
And then he, actually made a call to say switch the song?
He literally, in the middle of the game, said, I can't have this song as my walk-up song. It's jinxing me. I'm sure there was a few four-letter words in there. And at that point in time, he was hitting really well. And it was this station, right?
Yes.
That did it, right. They got Joshua's hit song, I believe it was Love Circus, or Circus Love, or it was kind of,
I think it was Love Circus.
Joshua, very similar to Chubby Checker, who had the twist, and then he had Let's Twist Again, and then he had like the country twist. He just kept doing it. Same thing with the circus or the love. And then basically they made this song, Colby's walk-up song. Colby was hitting well. Song starts playing. Colby becomes the worst hitter in the National League. The Cardinals are forced to trade him. But because of the trade, they got a lot of key pieces that ended up helping them win the World Series.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of texts, and we're going to read them throughout the show, but keep them coming for Ben Hochman, 855-282-8255. What you just said spins me into this current version of the Cardinals 2021. And I was actually thinking about this last night. It was probably because I had started to read your book the last couple of days. And it was the fact that the underrated moves of when you trade Colby Rasmus, he was the big name. But you got all these bullpen pieces. Mm-hmm. None of them were real sexy names at the time. However, you don't win the World Series without those guys. And it made me think about the 2021 Cardinals because that's what they need.
Right.
They need about 3 bullpen arms to come in and basically just fortify the pen.
Yeah, they need Zepchinski. They need Dotel. And the problem is the St. Louis Cardinals don't have those arms at AAA, or at the site in Sauget. So what does St. Louis do? They're going to have to make a trade. So then who do you trade? I mean, there's a lot of steps that Mozeliak and the boys and girls are going to have to take in the front office there.
All right, 11-11, a hometown hero, LaRusse's last ride in red, and a miracle World Series for the St. Louis Cardinals by Ben Hochman. So first of all, in 11, you were in Denver, correct?
Correct, but I was covering the NBA at the time, but there was a lockout, so I was able to fly home to St. Louis, and I sat in the last row of the bleachers for Game 6 and Game 7.
That is awesome. I remember you telling that story when you came back to St. Louis, which was what year, by the way?
The September of 2015, right when Yadier Molina started yelling at me. September of 2015.
So switch on. Moving to a new city in September of baseball season has to just be perfect timing.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, it was nuts. And at the time I was a columnist for covering Denver, so I was all excited about covering the Broncos, and this is the year they're going to win the Super Bowl, and then boom, left that, came here, Cardinals blew it in the postseason, Broncos won the Super Bowl.
Now hold on a second. Now that I think about this, and you just mentioned you leave, Broncos win the Super Bowl. You arrive, that's the 100-win season, right? Division champs, and then the second you get here, the Cubs dynasty takes over, and the Cardinals just go to
and not only that,
I know where
what happens in December of 2016.
I know where you're going with this.
Bye the NFL team in St. Louis.
Man, that's
honestly
rough, man.
Well, and Mizzou fell apart. Kim Anderson.
Oh God, it's true.
But luckily, the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup, and they were like,
there it is.
All right,
there you go.
We're fine. Everything's
fine. Let's focus on the positives. So tell us about this book. How long did it take you? Because I'm going through, and like I said, I started reading it. I read the Chris Carpenter forward. I like how you had the closer, Jason Mott. And also, the fact that you dedicated it to your wife and daughter, your daughter Olsen, correct? I thought that was so cool. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. We have kid number 2 coming literally any minute. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl. But I thought it was so cool that when your daughter grows up and she'll be reading soon, and she will always be able to see that. I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah. That's very sweet of you to say. Honestly, I mean, Game 6, the 2011 St. Louis Cardinals, I mean, that's ours. That is St. Louis's. And so to be able to write a book about that was probably the most meaningful thing I'll do for our town, if I may. Though last week's, I think it was Wednesday's, 10 Hochman video was pretty funny. So that in the book. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, this book is a passion project, so I was honored to dedicate it to my wife and my baby daughter. And yeah, but you mentioned the forward and Jason Mott as the closing. It was kind of funny. Everyone's telling me that I communicate with. They're like, "Wow, that's so cool, so smart of you, Benjamin. You got the starting pitcher, Chris Carpenter, to open the book with a forward, and then you got Jason Mott, the closer, to close it. But it fell into my lap. Basically, I know Mott. I'd done a lot of stuff for his charity, and so I asked him to do the foreword, the opening of the book. He's like, "Yeah, I'll do that." I'm like, "All right, that's awesome." So you just got to write it, though. You got to do it. Yeah, and the day before, I'm like, "Hey, Jason, we got to get this foreword in," and I didn't hear back from him. I'm like, "All right, I have to have somebody do the foreword." So I was interviewing Chris Carpenter that day, and kind of like, you know, the dork asking out the hot girl, I was just going to ask basically this stranger, Chris Carpenter, who I don't know, to do this big thing for me. So I go, "Chris, will you write the foreword for my book?" And he says, "What's a foreword?" And I go, "This is great. Okay." He doesn't realize how important this is, so he'll just do it because he's nice. And you know. Anyway, I explained it, of course. That's the opening to the book, and he was awesome about it. And he wrote this beautiful thing about how the team meant so much to him and means so much to him 10 years later. And then Jason Mott texted me the next day, "Hey, I'm ready to do that book thing." I'm like, "Oh, my God." But then I figured out he was the closer.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have Jason Mott close the book with the closing remarks.
That's perfect. And I read both of those sections. I thought it was funny because it's very indicative of both those guys' personalities, right?
Sure.
Because Mott he's funny, he jokes around, he's got the beard, he's got the great foundation, he mentioned that. And then Chris Carpenter, who we know is just, he's so stoic.
Sure.
And that's the way he wrote, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was great.
He
But
wrote
it's also
like he played.
I'm like, this is Chris Carpenter. It's matter of fact. It's to the point. He's thanking his teammates. Like, this is Chris Carpenter. He writes the way he pitches.
Yeah, well said. That's awesome. Yeah, and then in between the forward and the closing remark, I got 60 different people are quoted in the book, and just wanted to write a book that hadn't been written before. Clearly, Rick Hummel wrote a book with La Russa right when the when that season ended, which is a great book. But I wanted to write something special and new for the fans and tell some untold stories and a new twist on some ones that we knew.
So I'll give a personal story. And again, it's the second time now I've said not that great of a story. But I remember, so I was at game 2. And then I believe was game 3, 4, 5, was it Saturday, Sunday, Monday? I believe in Texas. And the only reason I bring that up is the Rams were playing the Cowboys.
Yes.
And so at the time we had Martin and a bunch of people for Fox 2 in Dallas for the baseball. And I was covering a lot of Rams at the time. So from, I want to say 10, 11, 12, till they left, I went on most of the Rams road trips. Mm-hmm. And so I went on that Rams road trip.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Okay, so the Cardinals played Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So we fly with the Rams on Saturday. And that was the Spags year. Spags took the team to the game.
Cool.
For a little bit
the
night before. And I remember basically all out begging Fox 2, just let me stay here.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was going there for the Rams.
Sure.
And of course, the Rams got destroyed. Shocking. It was one of those games where DeMarco Murray, he's still rushing. I think he had 200 yards, whatever it was.
He's
DeMarco
like Forrest
Murray,
Gump going through that tunnel and he just wouldn't stop after he scored the touchdown.
He had 2 amazing games against the Rams where he went off for like 180 and 220, whatever it was.
Sure.
I was supposed to fly back with the Rams, and I'm like, hey, can I just stay? I'll drive back with the guys. So I was able to stay and cover games 3, 4, and 5 in Dallas, which was absolutely awesome.
And you saw the 3 home runs by Albert Pujols.
We did, yes.
That's really cool.
And so that's one of those games, too, where now recently, when Albert Pujols was released and we started to all have the legacy conversations, I weirdly never thought about that game as one of the fantastic moments. And I only say that because that game got out of hand. And don't get me wrong, Albert Pujols is amazing. He has so many memorable games I remember. But that game, the last couple home runs happened at the end. So it wasn't necessarily when you were there that amazing, oh my God, he just hit another home run to put him ahead. Rocchio, you have it brought up. I don't know what the score of that game was, but I remember that game, the Cardinals won pretty big.
It was. However, his
16-7.
His
16-7
home run, his first home run of that game was vital to turning things around. And that's the thing about this book is like every chapter you're reading through, like, oh my God, I forgot about that. Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. And you know, even the 3 home runs, you know, we talk about it and we try to provide a different perspective in the book to remind you of those cool moments.
Okay, so from the text line 855-282-8255, I also had this question for you. It's Kyle. He says, Ben, was there going to be an audiobook version of your book? Because you have a very fun delivery when you talk. And I'm wondering, are you going to go through and read this thing? Have you already?
I have not. I thank you, Kyle. Maybe I should. Originally, I've been seeing people that have asked that question. I said, just call the house. I'll read you a chapter. But now, yeah, maybe I should look into that. So I will do that. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Charlie.
The big question is, can you swing big? Can you get like a chapter? Can you get like John Hamm to do a chapter or something like that?
Well, my wife does impressions really well, so I can just have her
just a different
different
impression throughout it.
I'm the only one in the house doing a John Hamm impression, but maybe she can do somebody else. Yeah.
Zebo's wrestling buddy texting in, saying, every time I hear Hochman, I picture him as a recurring character on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah.
And I do feel like you're a big Larry David fan, correct? As you should be.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love that. That show is probably a top 3 show of all time.
What else?
Well, I mean, of all time, is any shows all time?
Well, are you saying for yourself?
I just think in any list I make,
yes,
it's going to be in the top 3. But yeah, so I adore that. I also like Bosom Buddies. That was good. How did Bosom Buddies get a dang Billy Joel song to be their theme song? Everybody else had like some guy in some small studio in LA singing a song, and they got Billy Joel for the song. Anyway, I'm very much a Curb Your Enthusiasm character. I'm always saying neurotic things. You're not going to believe that, and just kind of getting myself in these Costanza-like situations.
Maybe the Billy Joel situation was similar to Chris Carpenter, where Billy Joel didn't know what he was doing. And
right.
He just gave his song away thinking, okay, yeah, it's all good.
Honestly, that's probably what happened. There's got to be a story behind that, yeah.
Okay, so a lot of fun in this book, and I started reading your chapter about David Freese, where you also get very deep into some of his off-the-field issues before all of the heroics.
Sure, and David Freese is our guy, and the reality is this. I mean, he could have been from Botswana, but if he hit that triple and then hit that home run, David Freese would be a St. Louis legend forever. But he's from friggin' Wildwood. He's down the street. He grew up going to the infield batting cage and putting in the tokens and hitting the 70-mile-per-hour pitch. I mean, he's one of us, and yet he did this superhuman thing. He's also very, if you will, he's super human.
Mm-hmm.
He's very human, and he's been open about that. And in the book, I interview a lot of people about him to kind of paint the full picture. And I interviewed a police officer that pulled him over in 2010 and on a DUI. And this was a Cardinals fan pulling over a Cardinals third baseman and wondering what his career trajectory would be after I the police officer, arrest him. The police officer also shared how proud he was of Freese's perseverance, and of course, he told his own Game 6 story. We all have Game 6 stories. But then David Freese himself spoke to Bob Nightingale of USA Today. He's been open about his battles with depression, his battles with substance abuse, drinking, and he's gotten through it. And you know what? He's touched lives twice now. He's changed lives with the home run and the triple, but he's also changed lives with people maybe listening right now who are like, man, if David Freese can challenge his issues and get help, so can I.
So what's your Game 6 story? You said you're in Denver, but you come back for Game 6, Game 7. Did you have to pay a crazy amount for the tickets? How does this all work?
I'm still paying that off. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and that's a fun thing. And everybody listening right now has a Game 6 story. And that's what's so cool about writing this book, 1111, was that I was able to capture a lot of people's Game 6 stories. Everyone from John Hamm, the aforementioned, to casual fans, to everybody. There's so many Game 6 stories in the book. Mine, yes, the NBA, I'm supposed to be at every Denver Nuggets practice every single game, but there weren't any in late October because the NBA was on lockout. I'm like, I'm going to St. Louis, and I flew home, and this is kind of fun. I went to Carl's Drive-In for lunch the day of Game 6 here on this very street, Manchester.
Uh-huh.
And I'm also, by the way, how is it possible that there's a Carl's Drive-In and a Carl's Deli within like 2 miles of each other? How many times has that happened in St. Louis history? Hey, meet me at Carl's lunch. All right, I'll meet you at Carl's lunch. Hey, I'm at Carl's. Where are you? I'm at Carl's. Where are you? So anyway,
that sounds like a good bit for Tent Hochman.
Yeah, I like it. So I'm at Carl's Drive-In the day of Game 6, and I look across. There's the counters, and you look across. I'm like, that's Mott. That's the Cardinals closer, Jason Mott. And I didn't say anything to him. All right, I did. I go, hey, Mott, good luck tonight. No, I didn't say anything to him. But I watched it, and then years later, when I interviewed him for books, I'm like, Jason, tell me about Carl's Drive. And he goes, look, I went there that day. I had the burger. I had the frosted mug of root beer. And the woman behind the counter said, not if, but when you guys win Game 6 tonight. You have to come back here for Game 7. He did, came back, had the exact same lunch, and of course he got the final outs in Game 7.
That's awesome. So Mott, this is back, I think I lived in Brentwood 2012 to 16. But all those guys, and I don't know if it's still the case because I'm not going out and about anymore, but all the young Cardinals always lived in the Brentwood Villas.
Yeah.
I lived in Brentwood Forest across the street, more by Obie Clark's. But all those guys, this would have been the Motts, Joe Kelly, Lance Lynn, I guess Chris Perez, John Jay. Those guys used to always go to Double D's, the karaoke bar.
Yeah.
And they would just sit there, and Mott was there, fantastic guy, friends with everybody. Never sang, though. He said, I want to go up there and embarrass myself. Everybody's going to take a picture.
Sure.
Or take a video.
Well, the other person who spent some time in Brentwood Forest in 2011 was David Freese. And I think a lot of people know the story, and of course it's in the book 11 and 11, that he slept on his buddy's couch during the playoffs that year. And you're looking at me like you don't know the story. I mean, it's an unbelievable turn of events. And I interviewed his buddy Dan for the book, and basically Freese was moving. He wanted to move into his new home, but they didn't have cable. So he's like, oh, man, what do I do? So he stayed at his buddy's house for a couple nights in September of 2011. Cardinals are winning. He's like, well, I can't leave now. And he continues to stay and sleep on Dan's couch throughout the playoffs, and that's where he is. And the night of Game 6, David Freese hits the home run, and then everybody in St. Louis goes out to celebrate David Freese, except for David Freese. And Dan tells the story, and it's in 11/11, my book. He comes home, opens the door, and there, sitting on the couch, watching some TV, is the man who everybody in St. Louis is celebrating, David Freese. And just imagine that image. Like, you're out there having the time of your life after the game of your life, and you open the door, and there's the guy just sitting there like, oh, hey, guys, how's your night going? How's our night going? We just watched you save the season.
That's funny. And we're out of milk.
You're right.
We need toothpaste.
Right.
Okay, so Chapter 6 is La Russa and the wild cards. Anything interesting? I'm sure, because Tony's always interesting. TLR, what did he have to say?
Well, I mean, I just loved talking to Tony and basically hearing his emotion about that team because it was such a special team to him. And him basically having this secret, holding it in, that he knew he was going to retire at the time, and not being able to tell anybody, and not wanting to tell anybody, but he's suddenly kind of smelling the roses. He's kind of enjoying the ride that was September that much more. And he shared a lot of fun stories in the book. And then, of course, I mean, they had to win that final game, game 162, and it was Carpenter, the aforementioned Chris Carpenter, who got the win at Houston. And then that crazy night, the Braves blew it. St. Louis makes the playoffs. Then, of course, they have to beat the dang Phillies, who were the best team. And here's an anecdote from the book. I'll make it quick, but
take all the time. You can even stay for the second hour.
No,
if you
gosh,
want.
you're
Honestly.
very kind.
You don't have to, though.
No, I appreciate it. So the general manager of the Philadelphia Phillies knew Nick Punto because Punto was a part of their club. And when Punto saw him in September, the general manager of the Phillies is like, you know what? I hope we get you guys in the playoffs. You know, because if you guys even make it, I hope we get you because I think we have a better chance against you. He was just kind of throwing it out there in casual conversation. Well, what Punto do? He goes back and tells Schumacher. What does Schumacher do? He tells everybody in the clubhouse, the Phillies want us. The Phillies want us. Let's make the play. So there's just more ammo, more motivation. Sure enough, the Cardinals make the playoffs. And who'd they get? The Phillies.
There's another guy, Shredder Punto, that you don't talk about it a lot, but ripping off the jerseys there after the game. Just one of those snapshots from that team. What did the guys have to say about the deficit? Because, again, I remember the narrative towards the end of that season, a lot of it was about Tyler Green. Yeah. About giving Tyler Green his opportunity, right? Because he's the first-round pick. He's got all the athleticism. He could never hit in the big leagues, but it seemed like at the time, what was it, 10.5 games, whatever it was. I remember asking Tony after a game about, well, are you going to give Tyler Green an opportunity? It seems like now would be a good time, 10.5 games out, and he's, it's pretty disrespectful saying we don't have, and he said this because think about it, how dumb am I now thinking you should basically stop trying to compete the rest of 2011 because you're 10.5 games out and give Tyler Green an opportunity. And Tony was like, it's pretty disrespectful to our team. And sure enough, they make the playoffs and win the World Series.
Well, it's not like he was replacing Rogers, Hornsby, or Ozzie Smith in the infield there. But yeah, I mean, that run, that's the thing is Tyler Green led that team in stolen bases, by the way. It was a fun little
I never would have thought that.
Yeah. It's just every single dude contributed something to that team. Every single guy. And the other part about it was there were so many great personalities on that team. And that's, I asked Schumacher, he goes, look, even if we didn't win the World Series, that would have been my favorite team of all time. Just because of the guys, just because of the perfect mix of guys.
So how about Lance Berkman? That chapter about the Bayou, that surrounds Lance Berkman, correct?
Oh,
I know you also
yeah.
have Ryan Theriot.
Some fun stories
down there.
That, yeah.
What about Big Puma?
Well, basically, everyone knows how important he was as an offensive player. And another trivia fact, he led that team, not Pujols, not Matt Holliday, in OPS. Lance Berkman was the top OPS guy on the 2011 Cardinals. But for however important he was in the batter's box, he was similarly important in the clubhouse. I know it becomes a cliche, guy's a good clubhouse guy, but you have to remember, the 2009 and 2010 St. Louis Cardinals had some issues. Brendan Ryan, there's some toxic personalities in there, and the team didn't make it far in the playoffs. They decided to bring in Berkman. They decided to bring in these other personalities, and Berkman was kind of the straw that stirs the drink, if you will. But he was just this amazing personality, and I was able to tell my favorite Lance Berkman story in the book. Here's Lance Berkman. I put it like this. He was the Dylan Carlson of the Houston Astros. The top first-round pick, the top hitting prospect in the organization, one of the tops in baseball. He's in AAA in New Orleans. That's the team down there, the Zephyrs. And but he has an injury, so he's out for a couple weeks. So what does the top prospect in the organization do? He decides to dress up as the mascot one day and go out, because they had two mascots, the Nutria, Boudreaux and Clotilde.
Oh, I knew that.
You probably knew that. Boudreaux and Clotilde actually got married on the field one day, and it was the most fans they ever got. They had an actual wedding. Well, anyway, the guy it must have been like a Passover or something, and the person that was supposed to dress up as Clotilde couldn't make it because of Passover dinner, so they only had a Boudreaux. So top prospect Lance Berkman puts on the 8-foot Nutria outfit of Clotilde, and he's running around the stands, and he's playing with the kids, and he's doing all these things, and word got to the bench that it was Berkman in the Clotilde outfit, and the manager, former St. Louis Cardinal catcher Tony Pena, is livid, and he's screaming up into the... Imagine if you're a fan and you're witnessing the manager screaming at the mascot, but he's basically screaming, "Get down here!" Because could you imagine if he had injured himself as the mascot, and then it would have affected his career, and Tony Pena probably would have gotten in big trouble.
And you talk about the fun of that team, and Berkman certainly was a big part of that. And I remember, so I'm looking up because, I never would have remembered that Tyler Green led that team in stolen bases. And I'm looking up Rafael Furcal, and I'm looking up now Octavio Dotel. And I just remember when those guys came on board, just the atmosphere in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
I know this is cliche, but I remember a game specifically, except for I don't remember the exact game. It could have been playoffs. It could have been the regular season. But I remember Albert Pujols had done something awesome. He did what Albert Pujols does. And Octavio Dotel is just yelling in the clubhouse, "Albert Pujols! Albert Pujols!" And it was and Albert's laughing. And we all know Albert, he didn't laugh that much around the media and all that. And Albert's a great guy, but also he was kind of stone-faced sometimes with the press. And I just saw him laughing, and it was Octavio Dotel and Rafael Furcal were also able to bring about a different side of Albert. And the whole joke with the happy flight, I mean, that was real, though, because that team was fun. And it was them throwing on the Hawaiian shirts with the happy flight and having a lot of fun with all that.
No question. And again, that's all in the book, 11-11, the idea of what made this team unique, what made this team special. And it was the guys, it was the dudes, and it was the ride. And Skip Schumacher tells it best. He goes, we would have these team dinners, and it wasn't just me and my buddies in the infield. It was the whole team, 20, 30 guys at dinner, and they're in I guess it was the Pfizer Hotel in Milwaukee. And they're
the haunted one?
The haunted one. And they're at the steakhouse. And they're playing credit card roulette. And the way the Cardinals played credit card roulette, everybody puts their credit card in, and they choose names, and whichever one remains, whichever one is last, that's the credit card they use to pay for the dinner. And again, there's 20 guys at this dinner. I mean, this bill's in the thousands. And I know these guys are millionaires, but the way Skip Schumacher shared the story is I'm a league minimum guy. I've got a wife, a family. We just, and meanwhile, the other card, it was down to Skip Schumacher and Kyle Loesch, who had just signed a $40 million contract. So Schumacher is sweating. He's nervous. And luckily for him, Loesch was the one that ended up having to pay the dinner. But he's like, I was the most nervous I was all year. I was less nervous batting against Oswald in the playoffs.
Loesch needs to just scoop that up at the end. When it's him versus Skip, you got to just take that bill.
Maybe he would have anyway.
There you go.
We'll never know. We'll never know.
Ben Hochman, 11-11, a hometown hero. LaRussa's last ride in red in a Miracle World Series for the St. Louis Cardinals. And again, the website?
11and11book.com. Check out 11and11book.com.